Maybe you do too. Voices that you heard growing up, right? Messages that sunk in and just stay there, right? Every week when it's time to start writing a message for Sunday, I just keep procrastinating. I don't want to get started. I'd rather go watch TV or do something else. And then I hear my dad's voice. He always used to say, well begun is half done. Right? Just get started and then it will go. And so I just get started and off it goes. Every time I walk in the house, I put my keys and my wallet in the same place right away. It's the first thing I do. And I hear my mom's voice. She always said, a place for everything and everything in its place. And she taught me that pretty profoundly. Often when, as a kid, I'd leave my shoes in the middle of the floor of the room. Any kids ever leave your shoes in the middle of the room somewhere? Never, right? Well, I did, and I would go look for my tennis shoes later on, and I wouldn't be able to find them, and I had to go to my mom and say, oh, I can't find my shoes. And she said, well, where did you leave them? In the middle of the living room, in the middle of the lounge. Is that where they belong? No. I hid them for you. And she'd say, a place for everything and everything in its place. And I hear that voice all the time, right? What's that? I learned my lesson. Now my shoes always go where they belong, right? I hear those voices, and my guess is you have voices like that shaped who you are. And the people of Israel in the Old Testament called those people, those voices, the voice of wisdom. Right? They recognized that there were certain people in life who had this ability to speak wisdom into other people's lives. Often it was the older people who learned life lessons and would be the voice of wisdom to the younger generation. Sometimes it was people who were just gifted with insight about how the world worked and how life works. Often it was people that God chose to speak through. It was God's wisdom, right, that they were sharing. And the book of Proverbs that we are starting to look at now, we're going to be in the book of Proverbs for the next 2 months. The book of Proverbs is God's voice of wisdom, speaking into our lives, encouraging us, helping us to wise up, to get wiser about life. So this week we start this 2-month journey reading through the book of Proverbs, and I hope you're going to join me. And the goal, we're going to do this slowly. It's not that long of a book. If the goal was just to read through the book, you could do that in a couple of hours this afternoon and be done. Okay? You could fly through it and check it off your list. There, I read the book of Proverbs. That's not our purpose. That's not our goal here. Because there's so much good wisdom here. Now, we are going to go slowly and we are going to soak in that wisdom. Because our goal is to really listen to God's wisdom and let it actually affect our lives and change who we are. Right? So your assignment I'm going to give you today, if you're up for it, if you're on for this adventure, is chapters 1 through 9 of Proverbs. And I'm going to give you 2 weeks. It's only 9 chapters. You have 14 days. In fact, some of you might want to read it twice. You'll have time. You can read it 3 times if you want, right? It's not that much. And in these chapters, if you're up for this adventure, they might not be exactly what you expect. Okay? When you think of the book of Proverbs, if you've looked at it all before, if you've read from it before, you know it's a collection of these 1 or 2 verses, bits of wisdom, right? And they just come fast at you. Just a verse here and a verse there, and it's this whole collection. And so you're going to open up to chapters 1 through 9 and expect these little bits of wisdom. And you're not going to find them. Because chapters 1 through 9 are the introduction, are the encouragement, are the invitation to receive this wisdom and to live it. Okay? In chapter 10, you're going to start getting those short sayings. That's what a proverb is, right? A short, wise saying. That's the definition of a proverb. But chapters 1 through 9 are your invitation. Okay? And in these chapters that you're going to read over the next 2 weeks, you're going to find that they remind us of the 2 core purposes of why God is actually giving us this book. The core reasons of why we read these bits of wisdom. What's it all about? Again, we could just read through the book this afternoon and be done. He said that's not the purpose. Hey, he says, first of all, you're going to find that these chapters tell us that these Proverbs are given to us to teach us, to give us knowledge of what life is all about and how to understand better how life, your life, my life, was designed to work. And you're going to find right away in chapter 1, it says that these words are given to you for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding life. Okay, so this book tells us how life works. Because there's patterns you can see in life, right? There's causes and effects that happen all throughout life. There's truths about how life works that you can look at and observe and identify. And knowing those things, knowing how life works, will make your life better. Ignoring those things will bring failure, will bring pain. And these truths, these patterns don't shift and change over time, right? We can look at the book of Proverbs and some people will say, these things were written, 3,000 years ago? For people in a different culture, in a different time, old news. They don't work for us today, but they do. Because there's truths, there's patterns in life that are true in all times and in all places. This wisdom, you're going to read in chapters 1 through 9, this wisdom is rooted in the creation order of the world. Right? This is how God created the world to work. This is how God created things to be. So, when you read these chapters, you're going to come across two sections. Let me tell you about them. And you'll say, when you read it, I knew this was coming. Okay? Twice in this section, there's the writer talks about creation. Goes back to Genesis 1, to when God created the heavens and the earth. And it tells us, let's start in chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 19 through 20, tell us that this creation was not random. That it wasn't God just saying, okay, something create, something happened. No. It tells us that by wisdom, God laid the earth's foundations. It says by understanding, God set the sky in place. It says by his knowledge, he arranged the ocean and gave it its borders. So this creation, God created with very intentional design. It all works together. It's all interconnected. There's an order to everything. Okay, and then the very next verses in chapter 3 say, now learn that order. Learn that design. Learn how God in his wisdom created the world to work, because then you can live according to it. And it gives you a picture at the end of chapter 3 of a pretty good life. A pretty good life when you live according to God's design. Okay, and you're going to see the very same message, the same pattern in Proverbs chapter 8. Right? The voice of wisdom in Proverbs 8 says, look at God's design in creation and now live according to it, and you'll experience blessing when you live the way he designed you to live. And that all makes perfectly good sense when you think about it. Because we all know there are some very clear rights and wrongs in the world. A right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. For instance, I know very little about woodworking. Warren back there has forgotten more about woodworking than I've ever learned. Okay? But I do know that when I've got a piece of wood in front of me and I need to sand it smooth, there's a right way to sand that piece of wood and a wrong way to sand that piece of wood. You sand with the grain, right? You always go, am I right, Warren? Okay, never mind. Don't look at Warren. Just believe me. You sand with the grain. Because if you sand against the grain, you damage the wood and you leave scars and ugly. You go with the grain. How many of you have a cat? Anybody have a cat? When you pet your cat, you always go from the head to the tail? Did you ever try going from the tail to the head? I bet good things didn't happen, right? My guess is that will leave scars too, and the scars will be on you because cats hate it when you pet them the wrong way. There's a right way and a wrong way, clearly. And you do the wrong way and you're going to scar things, you're going to damage things, you're going to hurt things. There's a right way to live, a way that we were designed to be. Choose to go with the grain of how God designed us to live, and there's often beauty that comes of that. Choose to live against the grain of how God created us to live, and there's scrapes and scars that come. Okay? Let me pause here a moment and just make clear that as you read this book and as you see this wisdom and the patterns that come, there are always exceptions to the rules. Even God's creation rules, because you know the story. The enemy, Satan, is doing all he can to work against God's created order. This creation has been broken by sin, right? And so these proverbs do not guarantee a certain result. Right? It doesn't say, you're guaranteed to have this blessing. It's not a clear cause and effect, okay? But they do tell us how life works most of the time when the brokenness of sin and Satan doesn't come and interfere. It does tell us these choices are the ones that will lead you towards wholeness. These decisions are the ones that will lead you towards goodness and away from brokenness. So as you read, I'm certain you're going to find exceptions to some of these wisdoms. It's kind of like learning a foreign language, right? Which I'm guessing almost everybody here has done. One of the first things you do is you learn your verb forms, right? And here's how your regular verbs are conjugated. You learn them all, and you think, great, I got that down. And then they come and they say, oh, but there's irregular verbs too. Here's the exceptions to that great rule that you just learned. And those irregular ones are painful. They're hard. They're difficult, and you can't really explain, why is this irregular? I don't know, it just is. Right? And so here's the pattern God says. Here's the way it's designed to live. Here's the regular verb for living. And Satan comes and says, I'm going to throw these irregulars in there. Okay? So, think of that when you think of the wisdom of Proverbs as you read them. Recognize God's rules. Recognize His patterns. This path that will lead you towards a life of health and meaningful work and good relationships and honor and respect and contentment and even joy. But recognize that path has a whole bunch of exceptions that the enemy works against God's order. Stacy and I are living through an exception right now. A good, faithful, Christian, godly woman. And there's brokenness, there's exceptions. So Proverbs tells us how life works. Encourages us to get smarter. Get smarter about how you're living your life. Learn the patterns, learn the ways that God designed and lead you towards goodness and wholeness. But more than just making us smarter, more than just knowing the patterns in our brains, these words of wisdom in the book of Proverbs are given to us to change us, right? To shape our daily lives, to reshape how we live in really practical ways. Because it isn't enough just to get smarter, just to be wiser. More knowledge is useless if we don't use that knowledge, if we don't apply it to our lives. So God is sharing this wisdom with us because He wants us to live it out. He wants us, His children, to experience the contentment and peace and joy and fulfillment that He designed us for. And these are His directions that He gives to us. They're given for our good. So as you read, I'm going to encourage you over the next couple months, You're going to read whole sections, and maybe there's one little proverb. Maybe there's just one that God lays on your heart and says, that's for you today. That one's for you. Let's work on that one together. So don't just know it, but live it. It should, as we read these things, we should apply them to the decisions and choices that we make every day. They should shape how we act, how we talk to our friends, our co-workers, our kids, our parents. They should affect how we treat our family members and our friends. They should teach us how to spend our money, how to spend our time. Really practical things. Right? The goal of the book of Proverbs is not just to give us knowledge. It's better living. It's changed lives. And all of us need that. I know I do. I've got enough brokenness in me that I need to learn how to live better. And so, as we start our reading this week, and I hope maybe you found a reading partner, maybe a small group of people you're going to read with, maybe your family, you're going to read these things together, because it's better if you have somebody to talk to. But as you begin this week, it'd be wise to start asking that very question of, do you really believe you need this? Do you really need wisdom? Do you really need to change your life? Do you need to learn? Or are you all set? Are you good enough? As you read chapters 1 through 9, you're going to hear these chapters as an invitation to you, not as a command. You're going to hear very little commands. You're going to hear invitations. A choice is given to you. Because the wisdom of Proverbs will consistently show us two ways of living. This or that. Right? You have a choice between two ways. You can choose the wise way or the foolish way. It's up to you. You can choose the way that leads you towards blessing, or you can choose the way that will lead you towards disappointment and pain. It's up to you. It's going to continually give you that invitation. But let's end our time with this. You don't need to turn there, but I'm going to look at chapter 9, the last chapter you're going to read in this section. Because these chapters culminate in chapter 9. In chapter 10, all the Proverbs will begin. And chapter 9 gives you that choice to make. Here's what you're going to see when you read chapter 9. You're going to meet two women in this chapter. Imaginary women, okay? The first one you're going to meet at the beginning of chapter 9 is called Woman Wisdom. Wisdom as a woman. It's the wisdom of God. It's the voice of God inviting you to live towards contentment and blessing. And then towards the end of the chapter, you're going to meet another woman. And it's woman foolishness. Okay? Foolishness given the voice of a lady. Often called, you're going to see this, let me give you a tip here, often called the adulterous woman. You're going to read that often. And here's your reading tip. You may read the adulterous woman in two ways. Yes, you may read it as in the very literal sense of the temptation towards sexual sin, which is true for many of us. Okay, that voice calling you towards sexual sin. But you may also, it's meant to also be read as whatever temptation it is that calls out to you. Whatever that temptation is for you, because we all do have that favorite sin, don't we? We all do have that temptation that we allow to come into our lives. And so you may read that as whatever that temptation, whatever that voice that calls to you to pull you off that track. So you can read that both ways, okay? And so you have these two women. And just before all the Proverbs themselves start with chapter 10, these women are brought together, and they're both given a voice. And they both invite you to choose. Whose invitation will you accept? Which one? Whose voice will you listen to? Whose home will you enter? Let me read the invitations for you. You might want to just close your eyes and picture this image if you wish. And here are these invitations. Woman wisdom says to you, wisdom has built her house. She has carved its columns. She has prepared a great banquet, mixed the wines, she set the table. And she has sent her servants to invite everyone, to invite you to come. She calls out from the height overlooking the city. She says, come in with me. She urges the simple. To those who lack good judgment, she says, come, eat my food and drink the wine that I've mixed. Leave your simple ways behind and begin to really live. Learn to use good judgment and live. And then comes the other invitation. Woman folly is brash. She's ignorant and doesn't know it. She sits in her doorway on the heights overlooking the city. She calls out to men going by who are minding their own business, and she says, come in with me. She urges the simple. To those who lack good judgment, she says, stolen water is refreshing. Food eaten in secret, that tastes the best. But little do they know that the dead are there. Her guests, the ones who accept her invitation, are in the depths of the grave. Which invitation are we going to choose? We're all choosing one as we live our lives. Every choice we make, every decision we make is one or the other. Wisdom or foolishness? Which one will you choose? And the answer to that question is not in your heads. It's in your lives. Which is what the middle of chapter 9 tells us. Between these two invitations, it tells us this. It says, the fear of the Lord is the fountain of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. Wisdom will multiply your days and add years to your life. If you become wise, you will be the one to benefit. If you scorn wisdom, you will be the one to suffer. So there's your invitation. The choice is ours to make. As we begin this Proverbs adventure, hear the wisdom of God. Hear God's voice calling to you. Be ready to learn wisdom. Be ready to live wisely. Do you pray with me? God, we so often choose to depend on our own wisdom. We think we